girl was driving down a bumpy road because her parents were going away for 2 weeks, so she was going to live with her uncles. When they arrived, she noticed the uncle's barn. It was so old and weird. She didn't know why, but anyway, the parents came out and they said their goodbyes and chit-chatted for a little bit, but then they eventually left. The uncle approached her and he was puffing out this cigar and you know, him and the girl were chit-chatting for a little bit. But the uncle, his job at the barn is to cut chicken heads. So when the uncle would chop off their heads, you would see the chicken's body just running around all over the place, and then they eventually collapse and die. So I would watch these chicken bodies just running all around, and then he would just throw the heads into garbage bags. So at night we had chicken for dinner, having a nice time and stuff, and before it was time to go to bed, the uncle mentioned that one rule, and you have to sleep all through the night. You cannot wake up at all. So she was like, oh, okay, all right, that's fine. So around 2, 3 in the morning, she heard this clucking sound. Cluck, cluck. She knew that she couldn't really open her eyes because her uncle wouldn't allow it. But she couldn't help but to open one eye, and she saw these chicken heads just floating around, clucking, cluck, 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 cluck. She was so scared. She's never seen floating chicken heads before. So she covered her head under the blanket and she hoped that they would go away. The following morning, there was nothing. Oh, she was so relieved. She didn't want to tell the uncle because then the uncle would find out that she woke up in the middle of the night. So she was just going to keep it on the down low. So that day, she watched her uncle cutting off the chicken heads. And she noticed these big, huge garbage bags, black garbage bags. And she asked the uncle, hey, what are those garbage bags? He's like, oh, you know when I cut off the heads, I throw all the heads into these big black garbage bags. Oh, okay. And then she thought, did the uncle ever have a wife? So she was like, hey, do you have a wife? Or ever had a wife? The uncle looked at her and was like, no, I had to get back to work. I don't have time for this. I don't know, she thought it was kind of strange that he, blew her off. I wonder if she did have a wife. That night, she was so afraid to fall back asleep, but she tried. And then in the middle of the night again, she started hearing the clucking sounds. Cluck, cluck, cluck. She opened her eyes, and again, she saw floating chicken heads, only they were covered in blood, and they were clucking, 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 cluck, 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 all over the place. She was so scared. So she covered her head under the blanket again. That morning she woke up and there was nothing again. Her heart was pounding. So she woke up and she entered the barn. She was looking around and she smelled this really weird odor, like it was some dead body. But she searched and she found this drawer and it was stuck. But she eventually opened it and there was this book and it had pictures of his wife. So he did have a wife. And the weird thing was the wife was into voodoo. You know, when you pin a needle into a doll and then that person can actually feel the pain. And then the uncle came into the barn and was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? So she was so afraid and she darted right off. And she was thinking about it and she's like, the wife was into voodoo and the wife is not around. She's dead. I wonder if the uncle knows. Who knows? That night, again, her heart was beating so fast, she didn't want to see those floating chicken heads. But she had to stay calm and just relax and go to sleep. She didn't hear any clucking sounds, which is fine, cool. Then she felt the bed shaking. It was shaking more and more. And she woke up, and for the third time again, she opened her eyes. There was this woman standing there, covered in chicken feathers and heads, and bloody chicken heads all over her. And it was approaching her. So she freaked out. And she started darting to the uncle's room. And the uncle was like, "What's wrong?" And the girl was like, "Oh my God, there's this woman covered in chicken feathers. She's gonna get me and stuff." The uncle noticed her, the chicken woman, approaching. He took out his gun and started shooting at her. And kept shooting and shooting. Then eventually the uncle just collapsed. He just died. And you see this feathered chicken woman still coming after the girl. It was so scary. So the girl thought, maybe if I go into the barn, I can find something to get rid of her. So she entered the barn. The chicken woman was still going after her. She was panicking. So she looked around, and once she went to the barn, she could still smell that weird odor. She was searching around, and she found where that smell was coming from. It was the wife's dead body. So the uncle was the one that killed the wife because she was into voodoo. And now her soul is still around the barn. So she decided to burn the barn down along with the body. She left the barn, she watched the smoke. And she looked to see if she could find the chicken woman. She didn't see her, so she was so happy and relieved. The girl watched, and then she turned, and then there was the chicken woman going right after her.